Thanks everyone for joining today. I'm Satish Rao. I'm Newlab's Chief Product Officer and excited to share with you an overview of Newlab, our membership community, and the value of being a member. The theme for today is a Newlab overview along with a focus on quantum. We'll have an interview and a moderated session with Seeqc after we're done with the overview. So let's get started to talk about membership. First, the Newlab is a singular community of experts and innovators, entrepreneurs, engineers, founders that work to apply transformative technology to solve the world's biggest challenges. Generally speaking, our community is comprised of mostly frontier tech-focused startups that generally fall under these categories you see here. We have a strong cohort of companies working in robotics and automation, material science and advanced materials, computer vision from sensors to synthetic data creation, AI and machine learning, quantum, which will be a topic we'll talk about later in the session, additive manufacturing, a growing community of blockchain, and of course, connected systems, which is kind of runs throughout all these categories, is also a growing category for us in the community. What we'll talk about today are the two pillars of Newlab, our two major focuses of activity that really help to amplify the value and the opportunities that we provide to our membership and to startups in general. And this is our membership resources and activities and our studios. And together, what these two pillars do are bring together innovators and entrepreneurs to work together to create sustainable solutions for industry, the industries that they work in, and oftentimes the industry partners that we bring to bear at Newlab. But first, we want to dig into a little bit of the numbers just to show the activity and the growth that this community has experienced over the past few years here at Newlab. As of today, we have actually more than 160 member companies, close to 170, with a few that have signed on over the past few weeks. That comprises over 800 entrepreneurs that are Newlab members, leading to about less than 15% acceptance rate. So we have a very selective process in how we pick those that join this community. Those members take up space in 110,000 square foot of space that we have in Brooklyn. And in that space, we have over $5 million of prototyping equipment available, from CNC machines to 3D printing, and most recently equipment from Tektronix for oscilloscopes and other signal detection equipment. More importantly, with all startups, of course, need capital. We have over 400 investors in our network, with over 50 that invested in Newlab member companies more than once, which tells you that they keep coming back to Newlab and our membership to find their next great deal. What this has led to altogether was over 700 million in funding raised by our community over the past 4 years, which is an incredible number to see in such a short period of time, leading to an aggregate valuation of north of 2.6 billion for our companies here at Newlab. And over the last few years, over $400 million in acquisitions, which have just been great stories through a variety of web channels here at Newlab. Here's an overview of our locations. Our Newlab HQ that I'm sitting in here today is located in the Brooklyn Navy Yard, which is a 300-acre campus between the neighborhoods of Dumbo and Williamsburg. Just a 10-minute down the street is Newlab 77 Washington, which is a 22,000 square feet of extra space, which we'll get into more details about. And coming soon is an expansion into Detroit through partnerships with Michigan Central and Ford, where we've launched studios focused on mobility and are leading to a growing membership community in Michigan in 2021. Newlab HQ is 84,000 square foot space that used to be a former shipbuilding factory. You can see the original gantries behind me. They used to carry the hulls of the ships across these rails over to the dry dock on the other side of the building. It's home to a diverse set of prototyping facilities that help our startups in the community build their products from prototype to market-ready products. 70 feet of ceiling height with a lot of great natural light and tons of collaborative workspaces, from open desks to private desks to studios. So really something that can fit almost any size company. But generally, the space is really designed to build collaboration within the community, which we'll talk more about. Newlab 77 Washington is a space that we opened up this past year, about a 10-minute walk down the street down Flushing Avenue, an additional 20,000 square foot of workspace. And this is for companies that have actually outgrown Newlab HQ. You're at 30 or 40 employees. It's time to have your own floor and really build your own community, but still have a strong connection to Newlab. And so this building has full and half floors available, and it's a quick walk to the Navy Yard where our HQ is. One of course, the questions that are top of mind in 2020, which has been a crazy year, of course, with COVID, is how we've been returning to work safely. Newlab is designated as an essential business in New York, and we were open since March to allow our members that needed to have access to the space to protect their own equipment and their own hardware to be able to open safely and have those workers come back to work. And so we initiate a series of really important protocols as well as advanced equipment to ensure that safety. What you can see in the video here is actually two Newlab member companies whose products we deployed at Newlab. One is Norbert Health, which is a remote radar sensing temperature application. So this is something where you walk into the building every day, have your temperature taken without having any contact in a contactless way. And then you put on a strong arm sensor, which is originally designed and currently designed for industrial worker applications, but was redesigned for as a proximity sensor to ensure social distancing between the community here in the building. And so with these two things, along with Newlab's building operations protocols when it comes to disinfections and contact tracing, we've been able to open safely over these past few months with over 90 members back to work as of today. So let's talk a bit more about the membership community, the benefits and the value. To start, we started about 4 years ago with 23 companies, have grown since to 160 plus today in 2020. So this is a huge increase over these past few years, which is a signal of the value that the community is sort of bringing to itself. It's actually attractive as the community grows, it just becomes more attractive to new members. The value again has also increased with the average valuation going from 7.6 million to 17.5 million. So you have a nice medium core of companies that are quite mature in the sense of that they've got capital, they've got prototypes and products, they're realizing product market fit, and there's a series of acquisitions that happen over that time as well, leading to this really nice sort of substantive valuation across the entire community. That community is changing and it's dynamic and it's diverse. And diversity is something we are focusing on even more in 2021, with about a quarter of our CEO and founders are female. 70% have some sort of master's or graduate degree, mostly in engineering or the sciences, which tells you the frontier tech mindset of our founders and the folks working in our companies here at Newlab. 39% are serial entrepreneurs. That means they've started at least 2 or 3 companies here. So this tells you the breadth of experience that's here within the community. So if you're an early stage founder coming to Newlab, chances are you can meet with someone who's launched a few companies before, who's raised private capital, who's manufactured goods abroad and so on. And for what's really been good for New York is that 38% of these companies have actually relocated from outside of New York here to the city, which is a great metric for the city itself, and something we're proud of as well, because we're now attractive to what would be traditional hubs, let's say Silicon Valley or Boston. Collaboration community is one of the things we're most proud of, and there's some real examples of collaboration in the community that have led to exits or product sales or investment activity. Jump and Voltaic is a great example. Jump came to Newlab and had a need of a powering device for its lock mechanism on its bike. Voltaic was creating solar grid systems for refugee camps, as well as consumer applications like solar backpacks. They came together and a Voltaic solar powered locking mechanism was installed in the Jump bike. And that's the product that was acquired by Uber for over 200 million. Clip and 10x Beta work together. Clip is a product that automates traditional bicycles. 10x Beta is a great product and engineering design firm here at Newlab. They work together to design and manufacture their current Clip product. And so there's lots of examples of these where just by the coffee room or in the kind of common areas or just by connections through Newlab, members are able to find each other and really create some value by working together in a very collaborative way. So collaboration really leading to something meaningful. We try to network that community and sort of enhance that collaboration with a series of activities. First is curated introductions, either within the community or to experts that we know within our network. Oftentimes members will come to me, will come to someone else on our membership team, and we'll say, hey, do you know someone who works in supply chain? Is there anyone at Newlab that does this? And so these strategic introductions are a daily focus of activity for Newlab, and that's helped led to some of the collaboration that we've talked about. We have member exclusive programming as well. So program around intellectual property, pitches, VC fundraising, topic focused programming in ag tech, let's say, or the series of quantum events that we threw last year. And so these are oftentimes member exclusive, or at a minimum, members are invited first and have a seat at the table. Oftentimes these events happen here at Newlab, and so members can access them quite easily. Our community directory and resource engine is a rich OS where one can find others within the community quite quickly. Are you looking for that PhD in fluid dynamics? Are you looking for someone who's worked in the in sort of the transportation industry before? Are you looking for certain expertise? You can probably find them in this community directory and resource engine. And we have an extensive and quite active Slack community. This is the community talking to each other about prototyping. Can we help each other out developing certain products? Do we know an investor that works in this space? A constant Slack community in certain topics and areas as well. And so this community is only growing, and it's a really great resource for our members to work together. We at Newlab, particularly our leadership team, work really hard to support the community as well. We bring to bear a really diverse set of background that we think can help the membership and have helped the membership in a variety of ways. Sean Stewart, as CEO, was formerly the Chief Business Officer at Google X and has built several businesses and can bring that mindset of scaling to membership. We have Lynn, our Chief Marketing Officer, who often advises companies on marketing and branding. Myself, I come from a technical background and often dig in with certain companies and to discuss their products and their technology. Shana Horowitz, who has a city and government background, and how you engage the city, how you execute pilots with local communities. Francesco Marconi, who is head of our AI data science practice, but also is the CEO and founder of Applied Excel, one of our ventures that came out of our venture studio. Great resource when it comes to technology and product and computational journalism and data. Hillary Howes, our lead venture partner, is oftentimes meeting with the companies to work with them on their pitch decks, their venture strategy, introductions to investors. And of course, our operations and prototyping teams are here to help the community in their day-to-day living in the space and building their products through our prototyping facilities. The Newlab Studio programming is a growing set of programs here at Newlab, and it's an opportunity for members to join a platform, virtual and global, that allows them to develop products, prototype, pilot them in real environments with industry and government partners. And so this is an opportunity for startups to shrink their enterprise sales cycle and have access to potential business opportunities with the industry partners that are coming and working in these studios. And so as a Newlab member, you usually have first look to these studios. Quite often, Newlab membership is sort of an overweighted percentage of those that participate in our studios. Our studios cut across a lot of those industries that you think would be relevant to companies working in frontier technologies. If you're a startup building this lily pad of technology, likely can apply to a lot of different industries, but getting into these types of legacy industries are quite hard. So the studio is a great portal for that. We run a 5G studio, Verizon, where there's Verizon's largest private 5G network is here at Newlab, along with an on-site edge compute stack. And so companies over the past few months have piloted right here in our facility in applications of robotics and automation, blockchain, as well as telemedicine. And so these were great opportunities for the Verizon teams to view these startups in action, see what their products could do when powered by 5G, and then eventually work in product partnerships with the Verizon team. So real outcomes coming through this industry and startup partnerships. We apply the same model to railroad with Union Pacific. We have a great long-standing program in mining with Mimson Group based in India. So a virtual program that recruited companies globally, but several Newlab members are part of this program as we work to get them into pilot opportunities in the mining space. And then mobility, running 2 programs in Detroit, Michigan with Michigan Central and Ford, one Civic focused on solving transportation deserts for local communities in Detroit, and a second that's more focused on the innovation around mobility and its infrastructure to really make it proliferate across the world. We have Civic-focused programs as well, our Return to Work studio that develops technologies to deploy within buildings and spaces to create safer work environments, particularly during pandemic times. Circular City studio, which focused on pilots in New York City to create more equitable city environments. So companies came, piloted with New York, and showed products that could be deployed for our citizens here. The Beyond Place, which is developing technologies and prototypes to build homes in Uganda. And the Accessible Street Studio I mentioned as the Civic-focused program for mobility applications that serve the citizens of Detroit and Michigan. So a lot of opportunity for Newlab members to come and not just work with each other, but work with Newlab and our industry partners and Civic partners to deploy your products in real environments. Our product realization and prototyping team is an incredible resource for our community, especially in New York. Having an opportunity to be able to build product in the city in this way is a really incredible opportunity. And so we have over $5 million of prototyping equipment, 24-hour access for our members, and full-time support staff that provides training as well as free consultations, which they often do in developing your products. And so the types of facilities we have are wood and metal finishing and casting, CNC machines, an expansive digifab. We just reopened up an ag tech facility, so growth chambers and things for ag tech companies to be able to prototype their technologies, a textiles facility, as well as electronics work, which includes most recently Tektronix equipment for oscilloscopes and signal detection. With all this, of course, we know startups in the world need capital. And so we work hard to try to bring those investment opportunities to bear for our community. And so we collaborate quite often with top tier funds, whether we're co-investing ourselves or bringing them to the table to meet our companies. And again, these are the investors who have invested in Newlab members multiple times, not just once. And so on the right, you can see a sampling of those investors that we work with, over 400 in our network that our membership have access to. In addition, we have regular pitch events for our membership with key strategic partners. One is the New York Angels, which is a New York-based investment group, and the second is with Google X, where on a quarterly basis, members have a chance to pitch their moonshots to the Google X team. The feedback from the Google X team has been quite detailed and really incredible. And so at a minimum, the startups get to learn where they should be going, but at the same time, sort of exploring real opportunities with a company like Google X. As a lot of this work that we do is also trying to preserve capital for the startups. So how can we make it easier for startups to spend their money on the things that matter? Well, one of the things we do is provide a very substantive benefits package. And so by approaching these services as a community, we're able to negotiate discounted prices on things like cloud services, Brex credit cards, TriNet for benefits, MATLAB for modeling, and so on. And so there's quite a rich sort of suite of services and products that you'll have access to as a Newlab member. Let's just go through the types of membership that we have and also the application process. I think it's good to kind of open up a little bit of how we view the community, how we choose and build this community, and so sort of what is part of our review process. And so first, the types of membership you can have are flex memberships, which is more towards the left, which is basically daily access to the building with access to an open desk. At the same time, you could also add to that access to the prototyping facilities. And so these comprise the two types of flex memberships. Some folks really need a series of dedicated desks. And so we have a lot of dedicated desks in certain areas in the building. And then finally, maybe you're grown enough that you need a private space. And so we have private spaces that can house up as low as 8 to 10 employees, up to 50 that are in the corners of the building. And so it does a few things. One, it allows Newlab to be sort of supportive of all sorts of types of members, all sorts of startups that are at various stages of their development. At the same time, it creates a rich diversity, not just across the types of companies that people are working on, but the stage of the company they're at. So the 2-person founder and founding team can meet with the 50-person employee team and understand, okay, how did you do manufacturing? How did you do scale? How did you pitch? And so on. And so we've seen that collaboration work quite well across those verticals. We're quite careful in how we choose these members, and I think that's important in building a rich community that's collaborative and fits well with each other. And so first, we look at who you are. We look at your background, what your interests are. We try to make sure there's a balance in the types of work you're doing so we don't create too much competition in the space. We care about the stage, not that we have a point of view on the stage, but just understanding what your needs are. If you're early stage, these are the types of benefits you would need. If you're later stage, maybe this is the type of space you would need. We care about the tech. We do focus on frontier technologies and also just have sort of a view on the types of work that we want to support. We look at the team. What's the type of team that would be in the space? How collaborative are they? And finally, there is a social responsibility element of this. There's certain things that we care about and certain things that we don't necessarily want to support. And so we look at what the product application is, what the point of view is in the world that they're working in, and use that as one of our ways of choosing the members to work with. And finally, community fit, which kind of fits in everything from all above, is your openness to collaborate and how you fit with the other members in the community that are similar to you or similar to the markets that you're working in. And this has worked quite well in balancing the community in a way where people can work across disciplines, but at the same time, don't feel a competitive sort of nature working with each other. So just a sampling of the Newlab members, and we're going to put just the quantum ones, since today the focus is on quantum. And so here's a sampling of 3 members that are in the quantum space here at Newlab. We have Envision Imaging Technologies, applying quantum-based physics to MRI imaging. Seeqc, who will speak today, that's building a hardware stack that will bridge classical and quantum computing. And find QNect out of Stony Brook, that's building next generation quantum communications applications and hardware. So we'll start by turning over to bring on John Levy from Seeqc.
Hey Satish, how are you?
Hey John.
Good.
So John, I thought we'd jump right into the conversation here. First, I just want to kick off, and maybe you could give us the Seeqc story, where you're coming from and where you are today.
So thank you. And it's really a great introduction to talk about quantum technology, because we're focused on quantum computing, but of course there's quantum networking, there's encryption, there's software, there's memory, there are many flavors of quantum computing. So it's a really, really rich area. And so I think the idea of trying to build an ecosystem around that is exactly the right way to go. But our focus is on quantum computing. And I guess the way to think about it is to think about the development of classical computing. So if you can imagine in that classic picture of the ENIAC computer in 1946, this room-sized computer with cables everywhere trying to deal with errors. And it was a digital computer, but it was built the year before the discovery of the transistor. And it took the transistor, the integrated circuit, the microprocessor, et cetera, to actually build the kind of computers that we use today. And we think metaphorically, we are in 1946 in the quantum computing space, where if you've seen the pictures of quantum computers, and actually this is an example of a dilution refrigerator in our lab that we use to run our computer. But the fact is that they look like these giant, Frankenstein machines with huge cables and dealing with error and the same sort of things. So what we're doing is that we have figured out how to equivalently build what would be the transistor, integrated circuit, and microprocessor and coprocessor for a quantum computer. And in doing that, it enables us to actually build a scalable architecture. And so what happened was about 3 years ago, I was the chair of a company called Hypres, based in Elmsford, New York. We ran a strategic planning process and decided that we needed to split our company up and spin out the group that's working on quantum and high-speed computing, which is what I did. I became the chairman of that company, and we spun out with us an entire chip foundry, a team, about 40 patents. And then we raised a $6.8 million series seed round in June of 2019. We then started building up the team, building out some of our facilities, doing a lot of recruiting, and we just closed just a few months ago a 22.4 million Series A, led by EQT Ventures in Sweden, and with companies like Merck and LG and others actually participating in our round. So, and by the way, I have to say, we did that entirely during the pandemic. And it was only a week before we were about to close that EQT, and this is the 9th largest private equity firm in the world and the 2nd largest venture fund in Europe, that they actually had somebody come over and meet us in person.
Great. That's a lot of progress while being locked down. You are, of course, an active member of the community, but behind you is certainly a new facility. So maybe you can talk more about where Seeqc is today and where you're headed.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Look, you've got to build out the kind of let me back up. We design chips, we manufacture chips, we test chips, and then we engineer them into full systems. We do that in New York, we do it in London, and we do it in Italy. And so we have distributed teams, distributed resources, and we're recruiting, and we are actually building a customer base and a kind of global investor base as well. So we have investors from Germany, from Korea, from the United States, I mentioned from Sweden, and from other countries. So because quantum computing, frankly, is a global business. There are so few people who can do this, and the requirements for recruiting are such, and the collaborations that you need to do are such that you actually have to operate on a global basis. So in each place, we're building out more and more test capabilities because you can't have enough tests for what we're doing. So right behind me, this is a dilution refrigerator, for example. It cools our chips down to 15 to 20 millikelvin, which is below the temperature of space. And that's where we need to operate. That's how our quantum computers work. They work in very, very cold environments. And so, those are the kind of facilities we need.
So what are some of the challenges? We have certainly, I feel there's some, in terms of quantum hardware, you likely share some challenges that are similar to traditional hardware companies, and certainly there's some that are completely different that your investors are essentially supporting. And so what are some of the challenges that are unique to quantum hardware? I know one of them you just mentioned is a lot of testing and building these robust facilities. There's probably a long horizon that investors have to be sort of comfortable with. Can you speak more about sort of what's unique to the quantum hardware kind of challenge?
Yeah, I mean, it's super interesting because in some respects, if you wanted today to create a high performance, let's call it like, the fastest classical computer in the world, an exascale kind of computer, you could, for example, buy off the shelf CMOS oriented chips. These are the kind of chips you get at Intel or NVIDIA or something like that. And you could engineer effectively all off the shelf technology into building an incredibly fast parallel processing supercomputer. But you can't do that in quantum computing because a lot of things haven't been invented yet. I'll give you an example. If you want to try to build a ribbon cable, if you want a ribbon cable that's going to go from 3 Kelvin to 20 millikelvin, well, that doesn't exist. You have to invent it. And so we're collaborating with the team in Holland to build such a cable. We're working with, we build everything out of niobium, which is a material that superconducts at 4 Kelvin and below. And when I say superconducts, we're working with single flux quantum technology. So we're not working with CMOS. Again, the kind of technology you'd get from Intel and others. We're not dealing with transistors. We're dealing with Josephson junctions. And so we're building these new structures. We're doing it on niobium, but now we're inventing work in tantalum. We're working with qubits, not just transmon qubits the way everyone else is. We're starting to work with fluxonium qubits. There's so much invention that has to take place to build a workable quantum computer. And then what we're trying to build is a scalable quantum computer. And that's the big differential, because what's going on at IBM and Google and Amazon and other places is what I want to call it's almost like labware or demonstration level quantum computing that will get you to a point where you can answer 3 questions. Can you build a quantum computer? Can it run an algorithm? Can it do something that you can't do on a classical computer? And the answer is yes. All of those have been done. But now the question is, with a different set of design principles, say, can you run an algorithm that has value to an enterprise in complex chemistry or pharmaceuticals or financial services? Well, that requires a scalable architecture, and none of those companies have been able to do that. It's what we're hoping that we're building. And so all of that requires invention.
And I think that's a unique bridge you're building. We know there's an arms race with the major players like the Googles and IBMs of the world to achieve quantum supremacy. There was a back and forth last year about that, as we know, between Google and IBM. Seeqc, I feel like, is a bridge between that to get to the scalable architecture that will serve society sooner. And so I don't know if you could speak more about that.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And it's actually where Merck spent, they had 50 people within Merck, and this is Merck in Germany, in Darmstadt, Germany. And they went across 4 of their operating divisions and spent 2 years with this ad hoc group trying to figure out how to play in the quantum space, who they can work with. And they came eventually to us. And the reason why was that when they went to everybody else, that they could say, well, we know how to get to, I don't know, 150 qubits or 300 qubits or 400 qubits, maybe even 1,000 qubits, the way IBM has recently announced they intend to in the next few years. But the problems they were having need closer to 1 million qubits. And the question is, how can they possibly do that? So we're not, I mean, we're working with 2 qubits, 6 qubits, things like that. So we're not really interested in the qubit count, arms race, if you will. We're much more interested in building a scalable architecture around a small number of qubits. So we expect in the next 3 to 5 years to be able to deliver what we refer to as application-specific quantum computers, but based on a scalable architecture. And so that's in the kind of arms race. And by the way, it's interesting, you mentioned before, Google coming to Newlab and doing the Moonshot group. Well, they asked for us to present, and we are now in pretty deep discussions with Google. I can't get into anything more than that, but just to say, they recognize what we're doing. IBM has come to us. So, we're able to engage with these companies. And by the way, IBM was a sponsor of one of the Newlab quantum events, and that's the way that we connected to IBM. So, if you look at who are the 2 big gorillas in this area, they're IBM and Google, both of whom we connected with at Newlab.
Yeah, and I'd like to touch on that a little bit more. I know that you decided to launch a very difficult sort of but high opportunity frontier tech focused startup. So coming to Newlab, I feel like there's definitely support through the ecosystem. So maybe you can speak more on the needs that we've been able to help you with. The introductions to industry leaders is one for sure.
Yeah, and I don't know if people on, who are participating in this webinar or everything, if any of you came to any of the quantum events. I guess there were either 3 or 4, I don't remember. of these quantum events. And they were sponsored by, one of them was IBM, another one was Waterloo up in Canada, which is a great academic institution for quantum computing. Another one was at Columbia and I think in Yale. And the point is that these are major players in the field of quantum, at least in quantum computing in our area. But it wasn't just that they were sponsored by these organizations, it's that it attracted, as I recall, there were academics, there were people from the US government, there were venture capitalists, there were engineers, there were people in the public who just wanted to learn about quantum computing. And putting on those events and by the way, we were able to present ourselves, gave us the opportunity to connect with these groups, for people to see who we are, for some of our investors to see how we perform, in these kinds of meetings, for people who are considering investing in us. So I think that's been, a really great connection point for us. And again, the moonshot thing at Google was fantastic.
Yeah, it's great. I'll comment on quantum too. Like Newlab, really, we have a point of view that we really want to try and help New York broadly, the state, the region, sort of really be the Silicon Valley of quantum computing. And I think it starts by building the ecosystem and that interest. And those events were a very key part of that. And there were 3 that we did last year in IBM, Waterloo, as you mentioned, Columbia, NYU, Yale. And I'm glad I've heard from other companies as well. We found QNIC through those events. They joined Newlab after attending one of those events as well. What else do you think, in terms of working with or being engaged with community folks that are not necessarily working in quantum, but are like-minded like you? How is that a benefit to you being a Newlab?
Well, it's funny. So I worked for Paul Allen, the co-founder of Microsoft, and a think tank in Silicon Valley many years ago. And I started a computer vision company. In fact, I started one of the first computer vision companies back in 1994. And so I know what it's like to work in the Valley and to work in really creative environments. And when the team came from Google X, the Moonshot group, and they came to Newlab and they kind of looked around, they said, like, this is the first place where they had the same kind of vibe as to what was going on at Google in Mountain View. And being in that kind of place where, where you're with like-minded people who have the same equivalent challenges, not the same challenges, but equivalent challenges, who are, I think, is a fantastic environment to be in. I remember, like, I'm sitting there doing a pitch at Newlab, and I'm looking at the building right where you are, and like buzzing over me is a drone. Right? The people are testing, you know what I mean? And then across the way, the guys are working on the coffee machine, it's I forget the company that's doing that, and they're debugging it and opening it up. And there are people who are like there with soldering irons trying to build stuff and fix stuff. And for me, I know that sounds like super geeky, but that's the world I live and love. And to be actively in that environment is like, it's just inspiring. It's just totally inspiring.
That's great to hear. And so I think in terms of final words before we move on to the audience Q&A, I'd love to hear more about what's ahead for Seeqc, and how do you think Newlab can support your progress? Right.
Well, I mean, first off, I think that the biggest issue that, I don't know, there was this article that appeared in the New York Times about 2 years ago that said there are probably 20,000 people in the world, maybe more, that can do AI and machine learning, and there are 800 that can do quantum computing. And so finding people, training people, developing that, a quantum workforce is really critical. We're trying to recruit a VP of system engineering. We're trying to recruit circuit designers, chip testers, all of that. So recruiting and having that profile in the Newlab community and letting people know that that we're really open to that. Also, it's funny. One of the areas that's really not focused on in deep tech is building a brand, and having people who have that experience helping, but doing it in a deep tech environment, I think is really critical. And having those kind of advisors. And the other thing I want to just say about about you guys, because I have to say it, is that it's that, whether it's you or Haley or, Cody or Shayna or Lynn or Dan or, Scott and David, whatever, it feels like everyone is pulling for us and everybody's helping us. And if there's a connection to be made, you guys, want to make that connection. And so it seems to me that's really the essence of it. Great facility, great capabilities, great environment, but the team and knowing that everybody is there kind of pulling for you and leveraging what you're doing, to me is, as the CEO, is as valuable as it can be. And I really thank you for that.
I appreciate that, John. I'm glad you're, I really appreciate you saying that a lot. We feel that way, of course, as well. And I think that's what makes the community here unique. And I see that within the community as well for each other. When we announce fundraising or an exit, everyone's very excited about that. And we will help each other kind of get to there. So I appreciate those comments there.
Yeah. And I think, it's so funny. Like I'll say, oh, I'm trying to recruit somebody. And the guy who's sitting next to me who's working on robotics will say, oh, you should go and contact this person. Or he's raising money. And I'll say, hey, have you spoken to this particular venture fund in Scandinavia? Because he has a Scandinavian connection. And there's just a ton of that.
So I'd love to keep going with there, because one of the audience questions was about giving examples of how member startups have mentored each other or collaborated. I know you have mentored many here in the community. You've attended our workshops. You're the most active person, I think, in our workshops that we run with other startups or in ideation in certain industries, for example. So maybe you can give a few examples of how you've supported other companies and vice versa.
Well, so just by way of background, I am the CEO of this company, but I helped the two founding teams of a company called Biolite and a company called goTenna, both of which are affiliated with Newlab, and to get off the ground. In fact, I was the chair of Biolite for 8 years, and I'm a board member with goTenna. And you showed, for example, some of the venture funds. Well, we were able to get Union Square Ventures, Founders Fund, Comcast Ventures, and others to invest in that company. And it's like it's killing it. It's great. So so some of the work that I've done helping other companies has been not just in the context of quantum computing, but also in some RF communications and in and even energy solutions and things like that. And so the work that I've done with, particularly on the RF side, has, I know, helped a bunch of the Newlab companies, and mostly kind of really early on, and just thinking about how to launch the company and how to think about building a product, manufacturing a product, marketing a product, distributing a product, all of that.
Yeah, we talk a lot about the open doors here. There's no curtains on the windows. I think I would break it into 3 basic pillars. I think networking, I think, is definitely a thing I've seen across the communities in the way we support each other. I've not seen companies be shy introducing others to potential sales opportunities, potential advisors external to Newlab, or just provide their own time as we're trying to provide advice. I think there's also collaboration around at the product level. So Slacks or meeting in the machine rooms and understanding, okay, how did you go about building this aspect of the product versus that? Lots of advice exchanged around manufacturing. Certain companies are at a later stage and have done manufacturing in Shenzhen, others haven't. And so what does that look like from a design perspective, from a cost perspective? I think finally the investor network, I think is can't be sort of undersold here, is that it's not just Newlab making these introductions as we have. I think I've seen community members introduce to each other potential investors, and that shows just the selflessness of it and the openness of it, which I think is a great part of the community.
Yeah, it's really funny. Again, it's, you could be in a space where people would feel very, careful about disclosing what they're doing, kind of covetous of certain relationships and everything. It doesn't feel that way. It just doesn't. Yeah, I think that, and so that kind of openness, physical openness, but also kind of the openness to people's ideas and what they're working on and relationships and all those things, I think is kind of a hallmark of at least my experience at Newlab and in the Newlab community in general.
Yeah, and there's another question here that came from the audience I think is relevant to you as well. It's quantum is a broad field, so what type of quantum companies is Newlab positioned to support? And And
Right.
I would think initially I would say, well, you know, software companies only, but clearly Seeqc and QNect are hardware focused, and we are a hardware community at its core. And so where
Yep.
do you see in terms of the breadth that Newlab can support when it comes to quantum?
So look, I think that there are some really, really interesting areas that are less developed. I think, you know, quantum internet, I think is really interesting. Quantum communications and going beyond quantum key distribution, which is a more mature, it's probably the most mature quantum technology around. But building these quantum networks, building quantum in a network, building nodes, building quantum memory, and then there's just like the software stack. So you can go from algorithmic primitives to operating systems to applications and all of those. And I think, you know, those are, and even firmware, all of those are super, super important. But, you know, if you think about the classical world, we have chip companies, we have systems companies, we have everything. When I say systems, it can be from an iPhone to, you know, to the Summit, you know, supercomputer at Oak Ridge. We have memory companies, we have application companies, we have operating system companies, et cetera, et cetera. Well, all of that is going to happen in the quantum space, all of it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And adding to it, you have quantum sensing, right? So, you know, building, you know, atomic clocks and building, you know, like the quantum imaging company that's at Newlab. I mean, all of this stuff has to be built. And it is, you know, and it's really, you know, it's funny. Most of the discoveries in quantum technology were actually theorized in the very late part of the 19th century and the early part of the 20th century. But it's taken like, you know, 100+ years to be able to take what was theory and be able to turn it into something that you can actually engineer. But that's where we are. We are able to engineer. The things that I'm doing back here with my team these are working technologies based on quantum mechanics, which is just mind-blowing.
Totally.
You know, just to give you one metric to think about it, if we built a quantum computer that was 500 qubits and had a low error rate, it would have all the processing power of all the data centers in the world and all the laptops and desktop computers in the world combined. And if we built a 501 qubit quantum computer, it would double it. So imagine trying to build a 1,000,000 qubit quantum computer. That's the world that we're building. That's the world we imagine. So think about that applying to AI, right? Just, you know, just AI. I mean, imagine that you have that space.
Yeah, totally. I think now that this 100-year of research is now turning into a accelerated engineering and product development path, this is exactly where Newlab can help support companies like you. I'll end with one quantum sort of topic, which is a question we get in almost every event that we do. But I'm going to ask it to you again, John. Is this a winner? Is this a winner take all when it comes to the scalable processor? We know it's a race. I mentioned that before. Is it a winner take all, or are we going to have a series of these types of processors that are unique for different applications, where we could have basically a large marketplace?
Yeah. So you know, that's a really interesting question, and people ask this all the time. And I don't want to go too deep into quantum computing, but just to say that there are many flavors of quantum computing: ion traps, neutral atom, you know, superconductive qubits like what we're doing, what Intel and IBM, and spin qubits like what Intel is. What we're doing is what IBM and Google and others are doing. And I think that all of them need to get built out to figure out what they're best at. And so, for example, it may well be that photonic quantum computing is best at networking. It may well be that trapped ions are best at memory and network nodes. And it may well be that superconductive qubits are best for, you know, high-speed quantum processing. But we don't know that until we actually build these things out. And once we build them out, it's my hunch that we're going to discover that we need all of these and things that haven't even been discovered yet to build out, you know, a full quantum ecosystem. So I don't subscribe to the winner take all, even if we thought that was going to be beneficial to us. I just don't think that's what we're going to see. So I think there's just huge opportunity right now. And by the way, where there's huge opportunity, there's also a lot of investment. And there's a lot of venture capital money that needs to be allocated. And believe me, a lot of it is going into quantum computing and quantum in general.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, thanks, John. I appreciate the time. I'm going to move over to just some closing remarks, but thanks for your time, John, and look forward to seeing you in person very soon.
You got it. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right. Take care. Okay. Bye.
Yeah. So thank you all for the time, and I hope you found a lot of information on Newlab, how we support the membership community, and a specific focus on quantum. I think that was a great discussion. John's great, and so you can probably find him online and reach out to him through LinkedIn. But as you can see, we have a strong interest in the quantum space specifically, but in general, we're constantly growing this diverse community of members here at the lab. And so if you're interested in applying, you can go to our website and apply through our membership portal, or reach out to Haley Robinson, our community manager, for more questions.